We are so excited to bring you a live broadcast this evening from Australia Down Under. This is Teresa from The Thread with my co-host Catherine Farrell, and we are speaking to you tonight and this morning as we have two wonderful guests from the UK who are authors of a fabulous book. We also have the author and publisher here this evening. So tonight we have Baldwin Trott, who is the editor and publisher of Being Fine, a fabulous book that speaks to men and mental health, or speaks to everyone really. There's our book, Being Fine. There it is, Joe. There it is, Steve. This is a fabulous book, and Joe has put this together, bringing a group of men and some women to talk about their story and their truth. We are fortunate this morning, to have two wonderful guests from the UK. We have Steve McDermott and we have Mike Sheridan. Men, please wave and give us a hand and say hello, as you do in the UK.
Hello.
Hey up, as we say in Yorkshire.
Good day to you.
And good day to you. G'day. And Joe, do you want to just pipe in there and say something to us this evening before we go to Kat?
Yeah, hello. Great to be here. Thank you so much, Teresa and Kat, for co-hosting with this evening. And like always, thank you to the authors of Being Fine for coming along to these really important discussions that help spread the message of the book and share the energy of it. So wonderful to be here. Really excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. Yay. And now we're going to go to our two locals, Catherine and
Dr.
Yeah.
I'm going to say g'day as well, just for those who are looking from across the lands and across the seas. It's my absolute pleasure to have introduced our guest from Australia today, Dr. Dinesh Palipana, who is Australia's Queenslander of the Year. He is a senior medical doctor at Queensland Hospital. And Dinesh, thank you so much for joining us on this extremely special panel tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. It's so exciting. Some amazing people to chat with today. It's going to be good.
Yeah. No, very excited to have you on here. And it's a very topical message that we get the chance to share. We have already shared in the past with some of our authors and heard some of their stories. So tonight is an extension on that. So I'm really, I'm really honored to kind of share your stories and hear your voices as well. So thank you all.
Thank you, Catherine. And yes, we are delighted. And we are going to actually have a chat to our individual authors first, and then we're going to pose some questions. So for any of our listeners, if you would like to raise some questions, just click onto the link and send us some questions online, or send them individually to us as well. We would love to hear from you, and this is such a wonderful cause. All money from the sale of this book is going to Black Dog, and it really is an important message. But let's go to the authors themselves. And Steve, we'll start with you. I love that your title of your chapter is Old Me, Depressive Me, New Me. So who is me? Who are you?
Right. So I've been a professional international motivational speaker for 26 years. Right. And I'm from Yorkshire. So those of you in Australia, north of England, right? No nonsense. Tell it like it is. Right. So I'm not a big fan of the rah-rah kind of American style of motivational speaking. So how, I don't know, is the word ironic that quite a few years ago now, I found myself clinically depressed, not once, but twice. So the old me was like Duracell bunny. I don't know if you've seen the Duracell bunny adverts where it's like wind it up and let it go, right? So you were jokingly saying, well, let the men have most of the show. Well, good luck, because you might not get a word in edgeways, right? So at school, I was always told you won't get far in life by talking in class all the time. And that became what I did for a living, but it wasn't really a job. So that was like the old me. right? And then I found myself in depression, and we can maybe talk to Dinesh about this and the causes of depression, and we can explore that a bit later. And I couldn't understand it, because I'd been taught, or my understanding was, the whole thing about your glass is half empty or half full. Mm-hmm. There's a paper in the UK, and they ask celebrities normally, can you still run up a flight of stairs? That's one of the questions. And one of the other questions is, have you ever been depressed? And quite a lot of celebrities, in fact, I would say the vast majority, go, no, because I'm mentally strong. I've never been depressed. I'm a glass half full type person. And the old me, that's what I used to believe. And then I found myself with depression and thought, I know all about motivation. I'm a motivational speaker, and I can't get myself out of this. We might go into how I did come out of it. And then the third part of that, my chapter in Being Fine, is the new me. And I'm fortunate to look back and see my depression as a gift. Mm-hmm. Now, it didn't feel like a gift at the time, I can't tell you. But now, in terms of how it's changed me, I like to feel I'm even more motivated, and particularly more motivated to help men stop saying I'm fine when they're not. Quite challenges as a motivational speaker, if you like, to go public on this. I thought the stigma of being mentally unwell or depressed had gone, but sadly it hasn't. And I think another big theme throughout the whole book, not just my chapter, is the notion that men have to be men, whatever that means, and it can't be vulnerable, and men, boys don't cry and all that side of it. So I'm on a bit of a mission to say, I'm from north of England, and it's okay, blokes, to say I'm not fine, and it's okay to cry.
Yes. And that permission that by sharing that story, you are giving others permission. And I think that's so important, is that for so many people, they hide it. But Steve, talk to us about, what did that depression look like? Were you curled up in bed? Were you drinking?
Yeah, so,
what did it look like?
Again, hindsight's a marvelous thing, and now I'm, if you like, well, whatever that might be, I can look back at it and be more analytical. But when I was in like the depths of it, it made no sense to me. So yes, it was all I think it spiraled. The challenge as well is, the other thing that I'm passionate about is, I think what often is forgot, or the people that are forgot in this debate, are the people who are having to care for the person with depression. And I think that is a real challenging role, because not only does the person with depression or mental ill health not understand what's happening to them or understand it themselves, but the people looking after them don't either. And it's a real challenge. So when you do first start to notice that things aren't well, and then when you get to that point where you're brave enough, and it takes some courage to say, I'm not fine, and you tell your male friends. I'm fortunate to have a small, tight group of male friends that I've known, in most cases, there's about 5 of us, up for over 40 years. And when I first told them, they were brilliantly supportive, but they all wanted to solve it. And they all said the classic things like, what do you have to be depressed about? You've got a great job, nice house, beautiful wife, happy kids, all that, why are you unhappy? And so people don't understand it, and they didn't, but other people would go, of all the people, I've had this a lot, and even now, because people know me, they go, I can't believe, of all the people I know, I can't believe you could be depressed, right? So it just shows this massive misunderstanding. But what it looked like for me was, when it got to its worst, was literally, the classic not being able to get out of bed, spending all your day in your dressing gown, suicidal thoughts, but not ever thinking that would take my own life. But it's like just wanting the pain to end. And then small things would, even the cat being sick on the carpet would be enough to burst into floods of tears. And you think, I just don't understand this, right? So that's kind of what it was like when I was in the depths of it. The challenge I have, by the way, is, it's such a deep, dark subject that I think it's important we can have a smile about it as well, really. I mean, part of my style is to have a laugh, right? So I can look back and, it's quite funny now to think just the crazy stuff what your brain does when and how you're faulty thinking, the things that you think about yourself, about the world, about other people. But it all starts, I think, from generational things. I think in the north of England, I think, you get it from your parents. So, we were taught as kids, as men are men. Boys Don't Cry and all the things I just said. And I used to think that was a generational thing. I used to think it was people of my generation, but actually there was a fantastic programme on the BBC here in the UK last night by Roman Kemp, who's the son of Gary Kemp's Spandau Ballet, and it was called Our Silent Emergency. So if you get to see this on, might be broadcast in Oz, and it would turn out that it's actually young men as much as anything that are suffering from this. And so it's not just the old people that can't find men that find they've got to talk about the feelings, but young men in particular, taking their lives at an alarming rate in the UK, because they're still not telling people, and they're still saying I'm fine when they're not.
Absolutely. We are finding that, and I know that Kat and I, with a lot of our interviews, we are finding that, particularly over the last year, our suicide rates and the suicide rates with our youth has been quite high. And we'll have Dr. Dinesh speak to us about this shortly as well, because I think that's something that in his field he's been able to see and also talk to. I just want to go to Mike quickly before we then really move into more in-depth conversation about depression, what it looks like, really what is it, and that's when we'll engage with Dr. Dinesh. But Mike, your chapter in the book, Being Fine, you read that and I love it because your title says he's menopause. So I'm thinking, all right, I often tease my husband and tell him that he's going through menopause or mucking around, but you're really talking about something that's quite serious and what you experienced with your partner's time. So please share with us your chapter and the message in that for us.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Joe and I kind of tossed around a number of different titles for my chapter and settled on that. But really, it's about my personal story of what happened to my marriage, a 17-year marriage at the time, a 20-year relationship, which culminated in my first wife at the time walking out the door, literally with only the clothes that she was standing up in. And there are two parts to my chapter. One is what that did to me personally. So unlike Steve's story and struggles with depression, what I was confronted with was what I later understood to be an extreme form of anxiety. And I eventually went to my doctor because I was struggling on all levels. I mean, I was not sleeping at all. I'd lost, a stone in weight. I was having, trauma sort of mentally I was ruminating constantly over the past. I couldn't see a future, and unfortunately got to the very dark place of really thinking about self-harm, but thinking about it not just occasionally, but frequently, and to the point where I'd even had thoughts about how I would actually take that to the ultimate extreme, if you like. So what my struggle is about is really, at the time, was I didn't have the vocabulary, I didn't have the understanding to what was happening to me personally to tackle that, what the language around that is, to help me understand it, what strategies I should adopt personally to heal and to it was really my doctor that put me on the right footing. And what he did was he prescribed not antidepressants, but sleeping tablets. And I've since discovered that, sleep is very, very important to us. And it's very important to me now. And it's something that, I focus on in terms of my own personal mental health and fitness, as well as diet, nutrition, and exercise and all of those things. So really, that's what happened to me. So unlike depression, it was acute form of anxiety that was brought about by emotional trauma, is how I would describe it.
Yes.
And I've since learned, and because I've read a lot, that this is very common. it can be physical trauma, an accident. It can be emotional trauma, i.e. a massive breakup, or a death in the family, or multiple deaths in the family, for people to then suffer, unfortunately, from an extreme form of critical anxiety, separation anxiety. I mean, it's difficult. We put a lot of labels on things. And one of the issues that I've been struggling with personally is that that's not always helpful, because everybody's journey is unique and everybody's life experience is unique. There are commonalities, but ultimately, how you face those challenges in life have to be of your own making. So I then went on a voyage of self-discovery, self-determination, got a bit spiritual with it, and sort of took myself on a different path. But to get back to the name of the chapter, I had to deconstruct what actually had happened to my personal relationship. I had no language around menopause. I know it's a bit of a taboo subject, although I think that's changing, but cast your mind back sort of 10, 12 years ago, and there literally was nobody talking about it. You can pick up a newspaper now or a magazine in a Sunday colour supplement, and thankfully there's a lot more discussion going on about it. If women are struggling to work out what's happening to them at perimenopause and at menopause, and everybody's on a spectrum, so some people have only light symptoms, some women have very, very acute symptoms. And I believe that's what happened in the case of my first wife and her struggle. So my mission, bizarrely, has ended up in a bit like Steve, obviously trying to help others. But interestingly also, I'm big on trying to include men in the conversation around menopause. Because I can tell you, men typically only look at and see the woman, the person that they married or that they met. They don't see the changes. They see the mood swings. They see sometimes personal attacks on them. They see strange and bizarre behavior, and obviously strains in the marriage and so on. And just as a footnote, because I don't want to ramble on too much, but I do think that chemically manufactured hormone doesn't always help the situation at all from a physical and an emotional level. And it was a lady doctor that told me that regarding HRT, because I went on my own route to sort of study this, she said to me, the experiment continues. And that was alarming for me to hear that, because if we're giving lots of medication to people at the wrong times in life as an experiment, it doesn't sound right to me, So maybe that's something the doctor can help with. I don't know.
Yes, no, we will definitely go to Dr. Dinesh shortly, but what I'm really pleased with both of you is that you are touching on topics that need to be spoken, and Mike, to even feel comfortable in speaking about menopause and actually touching on this topic, allowing women to start that conversation and know that it's just as crucial to bring men into that conversation and into their world. Because what you experienced touched on nearly everything that a woman is going through in this. Dr. Dinesh, we're going to go to you, and Steve may need to leave us soon.
No,
so,
okay.
Steve, you're all good? Okay, wonderful. Dr. Dinesh, I don't know how comfortable you are in wanting to even share your story, because we just spoke about physical anxiety and physical trauma, and this may be where you might want to share a little bit about your story. But here we also have some topics on depression, anxiety, menopause, suicide. What can you share with us in the concept of, speaking from truth and giving permission to speak from your truth? What would you like to share with us?
Yeah, well, I like what Steve said earlier about his depression. being a gift, because I feel the same way. I started off my university life studying law. So I was in law school initially, and I finished my law degree. But the reason I ended up in medical school later is because I had depression when I was studying law. And I went through quite bad depression, and I had anxiety and panic disorder at the same time. So at the time, it was one of the most difficult things I've been through, but it really got me thinking about life, and that's what led me to medicine. So if I didn't go through that experience, I probably wouldn't be a doctor today. So I'm very grateful for that, and I see it as a gift too. Having said that, it's incredibly hard. Depression, anxiety, panic disorder, these are all very difficult things for people to go through. And I see it all the time in my line of work now, and people go through some hard times. I've had a spinal cord injury since I've been in medical school, and now I've lost the use of my fingers and everything below the chest. I have a great life, and I love every single day, and I get to work as a doctor, and I get to do all these amazing things like share tonight with you, for example. But I've also had the opportunity to contrast a spinal cord injury with depression. And in terms of productivity and what I've been able to do, I've been far more productive since the spinal cord injury than I was with depression. The depression was debilitating to the point where I didn't leave the house. Whereas with the spinal cord injury, I still have my spirit and my soul and my brain, which still work. And those things have allowed me to do stuff, which is why I'm where I am. But I think the last year in particular, the pandemic, it's really brought to surface some of the issues I've been having. And we've lost colleagues in the medical profession. We've lost nursing colleagues. We've lost people that have been, the pressure has just been higher than usual, and the stress has been higher. And these are all things that contribute to depression and anxiety and suicide. So I think this year has really allowed us to expose some of these issues and talk about it a lot more like we are tonight.
And Dr. Dinesh, within depression, there is a spectrum. Are you able to share with us what Steve was saying with clinical depression, where there is the use of medication that's required, versus potentially the other side where you're having, the beginning of sort of down days and you need to talk to psychologists, or what does that spectrum look like?
Well, everyone has ups and downs. So there's normal ups and downs in life. So we might have a bad day. We might have even a bad couple of days. So that's normal, and that often passes. But depression occurs when it happens over a particular period of time, and there's a set of criteria that need to be met. So out of that criteria, at least one has to be either depression, so depressed feelings, and anhedonia, which is a lack of enjoyment in things. And then there's a bunch of other criteria that you have to meet. So there can be things like sleep disturbance, concentration problems, feelings of guilt, feelings of self-harm. There are quite a few different bits of criteria. And so you have to have a collection of these things to be diagnosed with depression. And at that point, even still, there's a spectrum. Some people feel terrible, and some people continue to feel terrible. And then other people have a more milder course of the disease, which, so these things might need psychotherapy alone, or it might need medications, or in extreme cases, there's electroconvulsive therapy as well, which people end up undergoing. I've chatted to some people that have had it, and they say like it's like a veil being lifted over their eyes once they come out of it, which is a really interesting thing. So I think it's important to understand that in any human disease, there's always a spectrum. So high blood pressure is a spectrum, and everything's a spectrum because we're all different. And there's always a spectrum of things. So, I actually remember the very day that I realized that I'd overcome depression, because I drove out of the garage and I could smell the air, and I could smell the trees, and I could see the sun, and I could listen to the sounds. I actually remember that very day where I realized something had changed. So people experience the world very differently when they're going through it.
Thank you. You could smell the air, you could see the sun, like things that many of us take for granted. We don't often realize that when you're in that moment, just what's going on. Steve and Mike, when you were in that, like, did you feel you needed to speak to someone? Like, what was the first thing that you did to either help yourself out or to share the story with someone, or did someone even see it in you? What was some of the signs?
Yeah, well, just before I answer that question, Dinesh, that's really interesting. So the difference between physical and mental injuries or diseases, right? So I find that remarkable, that what you just said, that even though you've got this spinal injury or whatever, that you're more productive now in some ways than when you were depressed. And I find that really interesting, because I think this, for me, because I didn't understand. I understand. People understand a broken leg, don't they? People understand that, and therefore, if you've got a broken leg, people get it. You put a cast on it, you treat it, whatever. I think with any of these things, and you say the spectrum, whether it's anxiety or, in my case, depression, I think first of all, the person who's suffering from it didn't understand it. Now there's everybody else. We never really got to the cause of my depression. I think one of my challenges was, not only did I not understand it, but everybody else wanted to know what the cause was. So the question that my wife, let's bring my wife into this. So I mentioned earlier, one of my passions is, let's think about the wider community, not just the person who's suffering, but the people that need to support them if they're fortunate enough to have somebody to support them. The documentary last night with Roman Kemp, he was saying his big thing is one of his close friends committed suicide, and his big challenge was understanding that and the anger that went with that and all the rest of it, and how could they be thinking that way. So to answer your question, I was in this dark place again. I all your senses do go into shut down, so you don't notice this, but literally you just have either no feelings around things or very, very dark feelings. And it was my wife really who was the kind of barrier, and I think the other problem is people say there's a big campaign in the UK, it's good to talk, just talk and all that. And I think the other issue with this is, even when you get to that point of bravery to start to tell people close to you that, look, I'm not well, and then a lot of your male friends go, oh no, I never expected that of you, and how can I solve it, and all the rest of it. The challenge isn't not just saying I'm not well, but finding the vocabulary. I literally could not find the vocabulary, and I'm a professional speaker. I like to think I'm quite good with words. I couldn't find the words to express how I was feeling. So that was really challenging, and it was a long, rocky road. But it was my wife really who, maybe because she's a woman and women are better at this, I think, said, well, why don't we just set up a WhatsApp group, because she got bombarded with my friends and relatives saying, how is he, and she was having to sort of field all those messages. So one of the things, and it's different, as Mike said, it's different for us all. One of the things that really worked for me as a practical thing was to start that communication by having a WhatsApp group. And simply, my male friends could say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10, I'm feeling terrible, 1, I'm okay, how are you today? And I could go like I'm a 3, so I go, well, I'll leave you alone, or no, I'm a 10, I'm feeling pretty good, we can have a chat. So I think we need to educate ourselves. I never really got to the cause. I think my wife Candy, her expression is, she says depression just is. I think we get sometimes so focused, and I don't know what a medical practitioner would say this, or Dinesh, but I think we're still a bit unsure what causes it. there's the obvious things like in Mike's case, what was going, life circumstances, job losses, we in the middle of a pandemic, there's all those things. In my case, could never really pinpoint, chemical imbalance in the brain. There's quite a lot of theories that say, it could be inflammation. Nobody's quite sure, and I think sometimes we put all the focus on the cause, and really we might not ever get to the cause, and we have to kind of deal with maybe the effects. And you've got to find the thing that works for you. And I'll maybe tell you how I got out of mine that would work for me maybe a bit later in the show.
Dr. Dinesh, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're right in that I think there's probably a lot that we still need to discover about depression and some of the other psychiatric disorders that we have. But the theory is that there are certain neurotransmitters that experience disruptions, like serotonin and noradrenaline and dopamine being some of them. And the reason that we've been able to hypothesize that is because the medications that act on those neurotransmitters have a good effect. So a lot of antidepressants act on one or more of these neurotransmitters. Interestingly, so does things like cocaine and MDMA, but those short-acting drugs don't really have an effect on depression or anxiety or anything like that. So it takes a long treatment time. Psychotherapy helps as well. So there's some sort of training effect on the brain over a period of time, which is why therapy is really important. But then again, there are also genetic factors and environmental factors as well. So if we're experiencing difficult times in our lives or have poor social structures, all those things contribute to depression as well.
And Dr. Dinesh, Steve also brought up a good point, it's one thing to sort of, if you're the one in Steve's case, to be experiencing depression and then to share that. And so the other side is receiving that information and what to do with that, how to help that situation. Obviously, you care for this person so much, so deeply. What would you say is some tools for people who are being that support?
It's hard, it's really hard because it's a really difficult thing that someone's going through. And I experienced this myself, where my friends and family had a difficult time understanding my own journey. So it does take a lot. And I guess one of the best things you could do is, if you haven't had experience with supporting a loved one through this, is just to get some professional advice about, my husband's going through this, or my wife's going through this, or whatever. And then try and get some professional advice yourself about how to manage it. That's really important, because otherwise the relationship can start to struggle and the friendship can start to suffer. And I know myself, I had such little insight at the time about what I was going through. So it was very, very difficult for me to understand, but I think it would have been difficult for someone else to understand as well. And insight's a really interesting thing, because on another end of the spectrum, I knew someone who was going through psychosis at once. And so they were telling me that they were being followed around by people, that their phone was tapped, and they had all these sort of paranoid thoughts. But they were so well formed that they almost sounded real. And I was a young law student when this happened, so I had no idea that this person was going through that. And I don't think anyone else around them did either. So their life ended up really falling apart and being destroyed before they came out of it. So so I guess the moral of that story is none of us might have insight about what's happening. And so it can end up in a very difficult situation, which is why I think an objective external input can be really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. I want to bring you into this because the conversation here with these three amazing men is so important, and they're highlighting really the need for us to have dialogue around this and the language. You know, we're talking about issues that, whilst each of our three guests may have felt alone in it, it is in itself a world pandemic. It is experienced by so many. What did you learn from this, Joe? What was some of the learnings as you spoke to these men and all of the authors in your book? What was the biggest gain from you from this? Joe, we can't hear you.
Sorry, there's bear with me a second. Of course, someone's just come to the door. One of my daughters. I'll be back in a sec. Sorry. So the biggest learning, I think, bear with me a second. Bless my children. That was a very a YouTube moment that probably will go viral now, unlike anything else we've ever done before. The window cleaner's here. There we go. Just to fill the gap of what is going on. My children just let me know the window cleaner's here. Yay! Okay, so the biggest learning point for me was very much that it's so complex for everyone. It really is so difficult for everyone to deal with, and also, as we've already picked up, just the challenge for the loved ones to cope with it as well. It's so fragmented. It's never just the person who's suffering it. And actually, I'm really glad to hear that in our stories that we've actually encompassed that as well, to really encourage loved ones to come up and share what they're experiencing, because it's so frustrating and heartbreaking to watch it happen, and marriages dissolve, related families dissolve because things aren't being shared, but also because people don't know how to receive information and deal with it. So there's so many complexities. So we all need to be aware. This isn't just a message to men to speak up more. It's actually a message to men and women and brothers and fathers, mothers, to really listen for the signs, and just try and encourage a conversation, one conversation and another. But the biggest challenge, the biggest learning is definitely how complex it is, how worldwide it is. I thought it might just be certain cultures as worse than others, but it's a global issue, and obviously especially now. But I'm really thrilled that we've now got a very young author joining our second edition of the book. He's 23. And he has just started sharing his story. And we also have an author who's 79, I believe, is a friend of yours, Teresa, who is coming sharing his Robert Gore. So we've got Robert Gore at 79, Perry Power at 23, because there is no age relevance to this. It sadly is across the board. And so,
Well, we are so grateful. Kat and I are just so grateful that we could have these amazing guests. And Dr. Dinesh, I really want to validate you and your story. We've had you on board this evening as our resident doctor, and we appreciate your expertise. But your story is a powerful story. And when you did make that, when you highlighted about the depression and your spinal cord injury, I see so much gratitude in who you are, and there's so much light in what you give. And I just want to commend you for your inspiring story and how it allows all of our listeners to feel. And I know for Kat and I, you are truly one of our inspiring stories. And for Steve and Mike, it's so courageous for you to speak up and share and allow people to connect with you and identify parts of your story in their own lives. And in being able to speak about it, truly, not only is that a healing process for you, but it actually allows others to identify, to then seek help if they need help, or for their families and loved ones to see that. So, Kat, we are going to come off soon, but I know that you'll have some closing words that I want to give you some space for.
Yeah. I also just wanted to ask, obviously listeners can reach out and connect to you guys. Hopefully you're open to that. But also for those who are tuning into this, it is a very personal experience that a lot of people were probably resonating with. So, Dr. Dinesh, I wondered if you would have any services that if anybody has within Australia had anything come up during these conversations that they go, actually, you know what, maybe I need to reach out for some help. Could you offer any services that you know of?
Yeah, there are plenty of good services. There are lots of local ones. So local health services attached to hospitals often have a service that you can access. GPs are another good one, and there are plenty of bulk billed ones that can give bulk billed mental health plans as well. But then there are services like Beyond Blue in Australia, and I'm sure in the UK there'd be some as well that you could just pick up the phone and give the call, and there'll be someone that will take the time to speak with you about some of the things that you're going through. But it is important to access those services that are available, because you don't be alone. There are people that care, that will extend a hand.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And I also just want to say, Mike, a big thank you to you for, again, being a man's voice to a woman's journey as well, and to, bear witness to that. I think that it's an amazing opportunity to bring harmony into something that happens for women. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And, thank you, everybody, for sharing a piece of your story and your journey that a lot of people can resonate with. And the saying was coming to me earlier today, and it's a light-hearted saying, but shared sorrow is half sorrow, shared happiness is double happiness. So thank you for sharing.
That is beautiful, Kat. I like that. I think we need to put that in as a little snippet underneath this recording. And Jo, that's exactly what your book does, doesn't it? Like, it shares the story. So for anyone out there who is interested to hear more of Steve and Mike's story and other wonderful authors that we have from around the globe, buy this book. You can get them on Amazon, Google us, connect to us. It is such a beautiful book with a number of authors. You get to connect to these wonderful individuals. But really what happens is you get to be part of that conversation, and you get to open that conversation in your own home and amongst your own loved ones. So thank you all for joining us. We will be doing this again. It is such an important conversation to have. And these conversations are going to be widespread throughout the next couple of months. So be part of the journey with us. Much love all. Thank you.
Thanks for hosting, Teresa. Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.